So here we have the reliability question. This is usually the final question in a paper 2, and the one we've got in front of us comes from the 2022 past paper. So you will have one of these in your prelim and you will have one of these in your final exam. So it's important to practice and have a good understanding of what it is you're supposed to be doing. Now, like all of the other questions, we've got 3 sources. We've got source A, we've got source B, and we've got source C. And as you can see, these are sources of different types. We've got statistical, numerical, a wee graph, a wee bar chart, and this sort of infographic here. So if we have a look at the question first, what we need to do is we need to say the extent to which sources A, B, and C are reliable, and then we must have an overall conclusion on the most reliable source of information. Now, this question is approached a little bit differently to the others in that whilst what is in the sources is important, you're generally going to find we're going to judge its reliability based on things like who wrote it, the date, where it came from, and so on, the things we've gone over in class to judge these sources. So we can still use highlighters. I'm going to take a kind of greeny colour and I'm going to take my kind of contrasting pinky colour, and I'm going to use these to go through the source and kind of decide if there's anything that makes the source more or less reliable. Now, source A is an infographic. We've got lots of information. This might be true or not, I don't really know. It looks very presentable, but what I'm going to focus on to judge its reliability is who wrote it. So first of all, the things I'm going to highlight positively are right here, the University of Glasgow and the University of Edinburgh. Okay, so 2 respectable institutions, 2 academic institutions. Down here, I don't know what CRESH is, but it tells me it's a research centre for scientists. Okay, so scientists tend to be quite credible authors. Scientists tend to obviously apply rigour to their academic studies. They tend to be well sourced and they tend to do lots of research and they tend to be experts at doing research, so we can probably trust it. But as I'm looking, one thing I'm wondering is when was this produced? There doesn't seem to be a date, so I'll just take a quick note with my highlighter. It's probably not the best thing to write with. It's not going to let me write with that, so I'm just going to quickly, there we go. Okay, so that'll remind me to look at the date. If I come down to source B, I can see, okay, wow, this is obviously from YouGov, and YouGov, I know from studies, is a polling agency, and it actually tells us that. So if in our answer we're going to say that YouGov's a polling agency, we're not going to get anything for that. But you should know, based on our chat, remember we do the whole voting behaviour topic. We'll look at YouGov in terms of its analysis of the election. We know that YouGov is a very reputable polling agency that's used by the government. It's used by media organisations who trust it because it's got a reputation for accurate results. Another thing we've got here is that, wow, the sample size. It's 41,995 adults. So that's very representative of the British population. That's more than enough people. You've asked more than enough people. If you've asked 41,000, you've asked more than enough people their views to get a representative sample of the British population. So that's very good. Other things we might notice is the date. So this is 2019. 2019 is a long time ago, and people's views have probably changed since then. So we could make an argument that this would be a reliable source if we want to know people's views on the day of the general election, or just coming up to the general election there, but it didn't tell us about how people would vote now. This exam was from 2022, and we'd argue that, you know, a date from 2019 is out of date even by 2022. In fact, I would argue that people's political views, if you do polls, people's views change week to week. So we could always say that this is out of date. It's no longer in date. It's no longer it doesn't reflect how people would vote today. If we come down here, we again, a couple of things we could point out. We've got Office for National Statistics. So hopefully we know, and hopefully we've gone over by this point, the ONS, the Office for National Statistics, their job is to provide statistics for the government itself. So these are generally seen as very reliable because they're produced by the government for the government themselves to use, and the government need it to be accurate, otherwise they're useless. So they've got a good reputation. A couple of things so I'd point out in terms of being negative about this. It only goes up to 2017, and thus it doesn't really tell us anything about today, so it's no longer reliable in terms of how up to date it is. And this word here, adapted. So adapted means the source has been changed, but there's no information here to say how it's been changed, what has been done to change it, and thus crucial information might be missing. So look out for that word adapted too. Now that I've gone over my paper and I've highlighted the relevant bits, I can start to write an answer. Now, the reliability question is worth 8 marks, 2 of which are for the overall conclusion at the end. The remaining 6 marks, well, there's 3 sources, so what we want to do is say 2 things, and at least 2 things, about each of the sources in terms of reliability. We want to be judgmental, and we also want to explain our thinking. Okay, so let me show you what I mean. We're going to start by looking at source A, and I'm going to say that source A can be seen as reliable due to the fact it has been produced by scientists. What's my spelling? Now that by itself is not enough. The fact that it's been produced by scientists, it's a good start, but we need to explain that fully. And I'm going to add who, as academics, will have presented, checked, and researched all of the statistics properly and thoroughly. And I'd say that's enough to get me a mark. I've explained not only that, it's a good thing that these people are scientists, I've explained why. I'm also going to add that source A was published by Edinburgh and Glasgow universities to highly respected institutions with strong reputations. Now, check my spelling. Oh my days. Let me just check my spelling there. Universities. There we go. So you might not know exactly the reputation that Glasgow and Edinburgh universities have, but you probably should understand that universities generally can be trusted to produce research. So, we'll just add that they've got strong reputations there, and that's going to help us get marks. If you're a bit unsure about that, we could also say, however, source A is less reliable because it doesn't have a date. Now, if I left it there, I don't think that's worth enough to get a mark. Like previously, we want to explain. So, because it doesn't have a date, which means we don't know when these statistics were produced, and so don't know if they are still relevant today. And I think that would help us. Now, I'm going to suggest that there's maybe 3 marks there. Oops. But of course, the maximum we can get is 2. So by writing a little bit too much, maybe that's actually quite helpful, because if we've not convinced our marker, if for some reason, we say something we think's very good, but the marker disagrees, well, by writing the 3 things, we'll hopefully still manage to get 2 marks. And if I can repeat that process for source B and for source C, we should have 6 out of 8. Now, to get our final 2 marks, presumably we've written 2 things about source A, 2 things about source B, and 2 things about source C. In a bit of detail, we now want to look at our overall conclusion. And to do this, we have to make a judgment about which source is the most reliable overall. Now, you can say any of these sources is the most reliable overall. There's not actually a right answer. There might be a more obvious answer, but so long as you kind of justify yourself in a logical and accurate way, the 2 marks are available to you. I'm going to go with source B, and I'm going to say that source B is the most reliable. And I'm going to say that source B is more reliable than source A because whilst source B might be out of date, it gives an accurate representation of how people voted at the time, and unlike source A, or so I'm going to say, unlike source A, which doesn't give any date, and so we can't place the statistics in time. I'm going to then say source B is also more reliable than source C because source C is adapted and we don't know by how much or by whom, whereas source B is not adapted. I think I'll leave that there. So I've clearly said I think source B is the most reliable, and I've given 2 reasons why, comparing source B to source A and then comparing source B to source C, and that should get me the 2 marks, and that's how I'd like you to approach your overall conclusion as well.